Hi and welcome to the Future.UCAT training series. I'm Dr. Ashley Hilton and I'm going to be taking you in this series through each section of the UCAT test and giving you lessons and advice on how to succeed and get the highest mark you possibly can. Depending on how much time I've got, I'll be releasing videos weekly of this new series. So make sure that you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so that you don't miss any of the important lessons that I'm about to release. And if you want to go even deeper and get an even better score, click on the link below where I give some free resources and a 20-hour online course and a question bank where you can practice questions, improve, get some feedback, and also see how you rank compared to everybody else to give you an idea of how you're going to score when it comes to test day. Or even better, I have a fully comprehensive how to get into medical school program on FutureDoc, which gives you support at every single stage of the way, from the process to the UCAT training, interviews, personal statement, and everything else that you need to succeed and get into your top choice medical school. So we're going to start this series by having a look at the verbal reasoning, and today this lesson is going to be an overview of that section. Verbal reasoning, as the name suggests, is about language comprehension, and I'll put it on screen the UCAT definition of what the section exactly is about. Essentially, it's testing your ability to read and think carefully about information presented to you. It tests your ability to draw conclusions, and it's something that requires no prior knowledge. And essentially what they're testing here is that doctors and dentists will get a lot of information thrown at them when they have a new patient or when they're reading articles to stay up to date. They want to assess that you can read something quickly and ascertain all the important points from text so that you can take away all the important messages and apply them to your practice. I know that I do this daily as a doctor. For example, when say a new patient comes in and you're trying to get a flavour of what's going on with them, know what's happened in the past with their medical care, you'll have loads of notes that you have to read through, and you have to go through all of them and quickly just skim so you get an idea of what's important that's going on in their life. So how is the verbal reasoning section structured of the UCAT exam? Now we'll talk about the types of questions that you'll get shortly, but essentially you get 11 question sets, so 11 passages with the 4 accompanying questions, and that means that you'll do a total of 44 questions in that time. Now the UCAT is a time pressured exam anyway, but this by far is the most time pressured section of the whole thing. You get 22 minutes to do all those 11 question sets, and remember the first minute is just for reading, so you can't actually answer any questions then. So you actually only get 21 minutes to do 44 questions, which if you work it out is actually less than 30 seconds per question. Now it's important to get these definitions right. So a question set is a passage of about 200 to 400 words that you'll get with an accompanying 4 questions. What the questions will be about can vary from any topic or theme or phenomenon. And what's really important to know is that you probably will be familiar with some of these subjects, but it's important not to let your prior knowledge taint your answers and how you view the text, because really what they're assessing is your ability to see what's in the text and answer questions based on that. So don't let your prior knowledge get in the way of choosing the most correct answer. So as I said, with each question set, you'll get a short passage of 200 to 400 words, and then you'll get 4 questions. Now, the sets of questions will all be either 4 true, false, can't tell questions, or 4 comprehension style questions. And it's important to note that whatever the style of question for that question set will be consistent throughout the 4 questions. So you won't, for example, get one question of true, false, can't tell, then a comprehension, then back to true, false, can't tell. They will, for that question set, all 4 questions will remain consistent. The true, false, can't tell questions are pretty self-explanatory, but here is a picture that I found on Google of what they look like. And with these, the most important thing to know is that with the can't tell answer, it just means that from the text, you can't 100% for sure say whether something is true or false. It could in fact be true and it could possibly be false, but from the text, you can't definitely say for sure that it's either way. Comprehension style questions can be a little bit more complex, because what you'll get here is either an opening sentence or question followed by 4 options, which can range from anything from a single word to a full sentence, and you often have to pick which is the most correct. Again, I've got a Googled example here which shows you what they look like typically. A key term that you need to understand throughout UCAT, but particularly in the verbal reasoning, is the term logically follows. And what logically follows means is that from the text, without any of your own opinions or prior knowledge, that you can definitely say this is this because it says so in the text. It means that it's free of assumptions, free of any leaps that you've made, and that it's clearly stated in the text that because it's stated here, this is either true, false, can't tell, or matches a certain statement. And I know that's quite a confusing thing to say, so let me give you an example. If the text were to say something like, for example, Jim has a brother called Steve, and then the question says, Jim only has one sibling, true, false, or can't tell. Well, the answer, we don't know. They've only said that he has a brother called Steve. Jim could have sisters, or he could have other brothers. It just doesn't give you enough information. So the answer here would be can't tell. However, if there was another question saying Jim has only one brother called Steve and has no sisters, then the same statement of Jim only has one sibling would be true, because they've told you exactly that he doesn't have any more brothers and he doesn't have any sisters. So then it logically follows that Jim only has one sibling. For these true, false, can't tell questions, and for, in fact, the whole of the verbal reasoning, there's a great strategy that you can use. Now remember, this isn't the ideal strategy, but you are so pressed for time that you have to find something that's effective and quick. Now, this is by far the best method that I've come across and works really well to get accurate answers within the time limit. So the way to answer these true, false, can't tell questions is, I know it seems counterintuitive, but ignore the written passage. Go straight to the question and see what the themes are. So if you see a particular word that the question's about, then you read the whole question, see what it's about, and look for the theme. Then you go back to the text and scan for any evidence of that theme throughout the text. And all you do is maybe you'll find 1, 2, maximum 3 mentions of that theme in the text. And then you read the sentence before, the sentence, and the sentence after where that word's mentioned. And then you go to anywhere else and do the same. And only then you go back and answer the question. And the reason is because you don't have the time to read and memorize all the important information and what's relevant in that text. You might read so much stuff and think that it's important, and there won't even be a question on it. So it's important to know where the questions are and just be targeted with what you're reading. Another really big tip when you're not sure and you're kind of trying to make an educated guess is to look at the types of word that are used in the question versus the passage. So if you see where the two bits match up that they're talking about, and something says things like never, always, definitive, conclusive words, and the other thing says sometimes, then obviously they don't necessarily match. So if the words do match, it is likely that the answer is either going to be true or false, a definitive answer, because the words are matching. However, if they don't match, the likelihood is that it's either going to be false or it's either going to be can't tell. Because if someone's saying something rarely occurs, and then the question says this never occurs, well, actually it doesn't never occur. So it could be that it happens even though rarely, but it still does happen. So therefore it's either false or can't tell, depending on the context of the question. Now for the comprehension questions, these are fairly new and actually only recently got introduced to the UCAT test, and they actually pose much more of a challenge than the true, false, can't tell question. As you can see on your screen now, I've put a comparison between the two types of questions versus the two, and some of the key differences between them. As you can see from the differences, one of the standout features is these free text answers and the value judgments. Now value judgments are those tricky questions where multiple answers could be true, but they actually want a specific answer out of those, and it's usually the most correct or most likely or the best answer. And it's really important to pay attention to the language that they use in these answers, because the way things are told, sometimes things just sound right, or just they use words that are very strong and conclusive, like I say, that make it really unlikely to be the best answer. So in the comprehension type questions, there are 4 main types of question that come up. So the first is incomplete statements. So essentially they make a leading statement and then you have to pick which one follows on best to make the most sense based on what's written in the text. The second one is cause and consequence. So essentially, because of this, this happened, or thanks to this, this was enabled to exist, or, you know, those sorts of, this leads to this question. Third one will be a kind of long form version of the true, false, can't tell. And these will be the kind of statements where they say which is most true, or which is which of these makes this not true? And you have to really watch out for those make it not, or does not, or is the opposite of type questions, because they really kind of seek out who's paying attention and who's gone to sleep in the exam. And just by missing a key word, it flips the whole context of the question and is looking for the opposite of what you might think. So it seems obvious to say it now, but I have missed so many marks for these questions where I look back and think, oh God, they're asking for the exact opposite of what I've answered. So make sure you don't get caught out by that. Number 4 is conclusions. And essentially this is what I was talking about logically follows. So this is what conclusions can be inferred from the text. Strategy for the comprehension style questions is very similar to the true, false, can't tell, which is read the question, find that area in the text, read the sentence before that one and the one after, then go back and answer the question. Now, the difference with this compared to the true, false, can't tell is that you're going to have a lot more sentences to read in the answers. And also this takes up a majority of the questions. Remember, 65% of the 11 questions will be this style. So it's really important that you save time. Now, one way to save time with this is once you have found the right answer, you can just essentially, if you're confident that that's the right answer, forget about the rest, move on, answer that one and move on to the next question. This only doesn't apply when it's asking you for the most correct, because you might read the first sentence and they'll try and catch you out by saying that something that's kind of true, and then the one or the one of the answers next to it, below it, will actually be way more correct. So only use this tactic is kind of one of those that is good if you can perfect it and if you practice it and you know when you can be confident that you can see the right answer and move on, but make sure you don't use it for these value judgment, most accurate, best answer questions. Again, this is another way that I used to get caught out all the time with the most correct, because if you're not paying attention, you'll see something and it's like, well, that is true, but then you'll miss that something blaringly obvious beneath it is even more correct and a better answer, and you'll miss marks just by kind of not focusing. But when you're going through the answers, you have to take each one on its own merits, and sometimes you can kind of straight away rule one out and then you end up with maybe 2 and you have to kind of decide between the 2 which one's the best. So to summarize, the verbal reasoning is a tricky section, mainly because it's the most time-pressured section of an already time-pressured UCAT exam. Because of that, one of the most important things to know is that the section is not negatively marked. So that means if you need to keep an eye on the time, and if you're coming up to the end of the 22 minutes, if you've got 1 minute left, you just need to go through the last few questions, and especially if it's true, false, can't tell, it's just at least click some answers. You might not even have time to read it, but just make sure that you get through all the questions so that you can at least click something and give yourself a small chance of picking up some extra marks. Because when there are so many people taking this test and it's on a normal distribution curve, a few extra marks makes all the difference. I can't stress this enough. Be ruthless with your time. If you don't know the answer to something or you're taking too long on it, just move on. You can flag questions, but I'd be careful with flagging too much because you simply won't have the time to go back and reread them. This is where practice is massively advantageous, because this exam, as much as it is about intelligence, it's also about tactics and familiarity. This brings me on to my last point, which is it's so important that you use some resource to practice on a computer, because you'll be doing this exam on a computer and it's a completely different game to doing it on paper. It's definitely more of a strain on the eyes than with paper. It feels different. It's completely different to doing a writing test where you have it on paper. So I can't stress enough, familiarize, practice, try and simulate the test as much as possible. You may have heard me talk about an idol of mine, Tim Ferriss, in other videos. And one of the tips that he gives for anybody doing a big event is to simulate the exam as much as possible. You're going to be nervous, your heart's going to be going. So what he says sometimes is, when you're practicing, go and do 5 minutes of vigorous exercise and then sit down and try and do the exam at a computer while your heart's going. Don't choose really quiet rooms. Go to maybe a busy area because in the real exam, you'll have someone sniffing really loudly next to you, someone coughing, someone doing an annoying noise when they chew on their pencil. You have so many non-exam conditions in real exam conditions. So Try and go somewhere where you will be annoyed, you will be distracted, and practice focusing on the computer while all that's going on around you. Another one to do is practice at the same time of your exam so that your brain is ready and awake and used to doing these type of questions at this time of the day. It will condition you to perform so much better when it comes to exam day. So that's it for the overview of the verbal reasoning. We'll go into a few questions and look at other sections in some of the videos. As I say, I'll be releasing probably weekly videos depending on how busy I am. But let me make one final plea to you. This exam is the first massive and hard hurdle that you'll have to getting into your dental school or medical school of choice. It is uncompromising and you have to get a good score to stand a chance. And again, you're competing against other people, not just yourself in this. The only way to do really well is to practice, practice, practice. So I urge you, get a really good resource, get an online resource, get some questions that you can practice. And if you want to try some of the Future ones, click on the link below and there are some resources there that you can use. But it's so important to get familiar with the test and really give it your all, because it's such an important part of the medical school application process, and really something that if you don't do well, it will hold you back massively. So please take it seriously, give it your best and work really hard, and I'll see you in the next lesson.